It all started with these simple things, the small, almost unnoticed changes that slowly built up over time. At first, Jeff was attentive, caring, and everything I thought a husband should be. He would text me sweet messages during the day, cook dinner when I was exhausted, and he always made me feel like I was the most important person in his life. But a few months after the wedding, something shifted. The warmth in his eyes began to fade, replaced by a cold indifference. The small, loving gestures disappeared, and in their place came the subtle signs of resentment. The first time I noticed it was when I asked him to help me with the dishes after dinner. His response was quick and sharp. "Why don't you do it yourself?" I worked all day. It stung, but I let it slide. Maybe he had a rough day. Everyone has bad days, right? But those moments began to multiply, and I started to wonder if this was the same man I had married just a few months earlier. As the weeks passed, the small disagreements between us turned into full-blown arguments. It wasn't just about the dishes anymore. It was about everything. From the way I cooked to how I cleaned, nothing I did seemed to meet his standards. Jeff had become someone who found fault in everything I did, no matter how hard I tried. He started coming home later and later, claiming work was overwhelming him. But when he did come home, the hostility between us was thick enough to choke on. We didn't talk, not really. It was as though we had both become strangers living under the same roof. I thought maybe it was just a phase, something we could work through. After all, we were newlyweds, and marriage wasn't supposed to be easy. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a rough patch. It felt like something was breaking, and I didn't know how to stop it. One night, after yet another argument about something trivial, Jeff said something that sent a chill down my spine. "You've changed," he muttered, not even bothering to look at me. "This isn't the life I signed up for." His words were like a slap to the face, and I didn't know how to respond. How had I changed? I was the same person I had always been, but suddenly, it seemed like I was the one ruining everything. His statement lingered in the air, heavy and suffocating, and for the first time, I began to question if I really was the problem. Was I not trying hard enough? Had I somehow driven him away? The self-doubt crept in slowly, feeding on every harsh word, every disappointed glance he threw my way. I didn't recognize our relationship anymore, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Jeff had changed too. The man I had fallen in love with seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone I could hardly stand to be around. Then came the night that everything fell apart. It was a Tuesday, and Jeff came home even later than usual. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the cold dinner I had made hours earlier, waiting for him. When he finally walked through the door, he didn't offer an apology or an explanation. He just tossed his bag onto the floor and went straight to the fridge. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, my hands shaking as I confronted him. "We need to talk, Jeff." He didn't even turn around, just sighed in that infuriating way he always did. "About what?" he asked, his voice flat and uninterested. "About us," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Something's wrong. You barely talk to me anymore, and I feel like you're not even trying." He finally turned to face me, and the look in his eyes made my stomach drop. "Maybe because I'm done trying," he said coldly. "This marriage isn't working. It's not what I want." I stood there frozen as his words sank in. This wasn't just another argument. This was Jeff telling me he wanted out. I felt like the floor had fallen out from under me. "What do you mean, it's not what you want? We're married. We made a commitment," I said, my voice rising with desperation. He just shrugged, as if the vows we had exchanged meant nothing. "People change, Courtney. I've changed. You've changed. This isn't what I want anymore." I'm not happy. The casual way he said it made me feel sick. How could he throw away everything we had built together so easily? We had only been married for a year, and now he was acting like it had all been a mistake. I wanted to scream, to beg him to stay, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the realization that this wasn't just about us drifting apart. There was something else going on, something he wasn't telling me. I could feel it in my bones, and I was determined to find out what it was. The next few days were a blur of confusion and heartache. Jeff barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was like talking to a stranger. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't figure out what. He had stopped wearing his wedding ring, and every time I asked him about it, he shrugged it off. "It doesn't mean anything," he'd say, brushing aside my concerns. But it did mean something. It meant everything. One evening, while Jeff was out late again, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through his phone. My hands shook as I scrolled through his messages, my heart pounding in my chest. And that's when I found it, the text messages that shattered any hope I had left. They were from someone named Emily, and the words between them were intimate, far too intimate for a married man to be sharing with someone else. My stomach twisted as I read through them, each message confirming what I had feared all along. Jeff wasn't just done with our marriage. He had already moved on. The betrayal hit me like a tidal wave, knocking the breath out of me. How long had this been going on? Was this why he had been so distant, so cold? The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. The late nights, the constant arguments, the way he never seemed to care anymore. It all made sense now. He had checked out of our marriage long before he had the guts to tell me, and instead of trying to fix things, he had found comfort in someone else. My hands trembled as I put his phone down, the weight of the situation crashing over me. I couldn't believe this was happening. I couldn't believe that the man I had trusted, the man I had vowed to spend the rest of my life with, had betrayed me in the worst way possible. I felt like a fool for not seeing it sooner, for holding on to the hope that we could still make things work. But now, there was no denying the truth. Our marriage was over, and Jeff had made that decision long before I ever knew. When Jeff came home that night, I was sitting on the couch, waiting for him. I had thought about confronting him right away, screaming at him for what he had done, but when he walked through the door, I realized something. I was done. I didn't have the energy to fight for a marriage that had already fallen apart. So instead, I handed him his phone, opened to the messages from Emily. He froze, his eyes widening as he realized what I had seen. "Courtney, I can explain," he stammered, but I held up my hand to stop him. "Don't. I don't want to hear it," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "I know everything, Jeff. I know about her, and I know that you've already given up on us." He opened his mouth to argue, but there was nothing left to say. The truth was out, and no amount of excuses could change what he had done. "We're done," I said quietly, and for the first time I meant it. I wasn't just saying it in the heat of an argument. This was the end. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I had thought I would feel devastated, heartbroken beyond repair, but instead I felt a strange sense of relief. It was as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I could finally breathe again. I had spent so long trying to hold on to something that was already broken, and now that it was over, I realized how exhausting it had been. Jeff didn't put up much of a fight. He seemed resigned to the fact that our marriage was over, and within a week we had started the process of divorce. It was surreal how quickly it all happened, how easily everything fell apart. But I didn't feel sad about it. Not anymore. The hardest part had been discovering his betrayal, and now that I knew the truth, there was no going back. The man I had married was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize, and I was finally ready to let go. In the weeks that followed, I started to rebuild my life. It wasn't easy, of course. There were moments when the loneliness crept in, and I would find myself thinking about the good times Jeff and I had shared. But those moments were fleeting, and they were quickly overshadowed by the anger and hurt he had caused. I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the routine and the distraction it provided. Friends and family rallied around me, offering support and reminding me that I deserved better than what Jeff had given me. Slowly but surely, I started to believe them. I started to realize that my life wasn't over just because my marriage was. In fact, in many ways, it felt like it was just beginning. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control again. I didn't have to tiptoe around Jeff's moods or worry about what I was doing wrong. I could just be myself, and that was enough. One day, while going through the final divorce paperwork, I noticed something odd. In the section that listed our assets, there was an account I didn't recognize. Curious, I called my lawyer, who promised to look into it. A few days later, he called me back with the news. Jeff had been hiding money. He had set up a secret account and had been siphoning off funds from our joint account for months, possibly even before we got married. The revelation was shocking, but not entirely surprising. It fit with everything I had come to learn about Jeff over the past year. He was selfish, always looking out for himself, no matter the cost to others. I had already felt betrayed by his affair, but now I realized that the betrayal went even deeper than I had thought. He hadn't just been unfaithful. He had been planning his escape long before I even knew something was wrong, and he had planned to leave me with nothing. But Jeff hadn't counted on one thing. I wasn't the same woman he had married. I wasn't the woman who would sit back and let him walk all over me. Armed with the evidence my lawyer had found, I confronted Jeff one last time. This time, it wasn't about trying to save our marriage. It was about holding him accountable for everything he had done. He tried to deny it, of course. He always did. But the proof was undeniable, and when he realized he had no way out, he finally admitted the truth. The man who had once been so confident, so sure that he could get away with anything, was now reduced to a shell of himself. He lost everything: his money, his home, and his reputation. And as I walked away from that final confrontation, I felt nothing but satisfaction. I was free. Free from the lies, the betrayal, and the constant battle to keep something alive that had been dead for a long time. My life was mine again. And for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly what I wanted.